Okay, so here's the coordinate axes. In quadrant 1, which trig things are positive?
Both. X and Y.
Cosine and sine.
Joe?
Cosine, tangent, and sine.
Not good enough. Sorry. Next person. Tristan?
All six.
All of them.
Oh.
All of them are positive. In quadrant 2, which ones are positive? Alexis? Specific.
It's negative and positive.
Not what I'm looking for.
Which ones?
Shh. Adira.
Sine and cosecant.
Sine and cosecant. Or in other words, the things that pertain to the sine functions. Because cosecant is 1 over the sine and sine. So anything to do with sine specifically and only, those are the things that are positive in quadrant 2. In quadrant 3, what's positive? Somebody different. Aaron.
Is it tangent and cotangent?
It is tangent and cotangent. Or in other words, what's specifically referring to the tangent? Because remember, cotangent's 1 over the tangent. So anything to do with tangent is positive in the 3rd quadrant. Good job. And in the 4th quadrant, with somebody who has not participated yet, Liam, the cosine functions, or in other words, cosine and secant, which is 1 over the cosine, are positive. So this little diagram is referring to positive values. So that might be helpful because if you know where they're positive, then if it's not there, then it's negative, right? So the way that they taught this when I was in school is all students take calculus, going around the quadrants. I've never forgot it, so I know it's ASTC. You can figure out something else if you want. But this is just a diagram showing you, and again, I don't memorize this, I just kind of know it based on like going around, where the X's and Y's are positives and negatives. So if you like that kind of chart, you like those kind of things, just another way to remember. It's not necessary to memorize that, but just another tool. Grab your calculator. Something that's super important in this chapter is to know whether or not your mode is degrees or radians. Because if you are not in the right mode in chapter 4, you will flunk the test. I'm just telling you right now, it's super important. So all of this stuff, where it says evaluate the trig functions, is all about the unit circle. You should know all of these by heart. So anything that's a pi over 3, anything, is always going to be a 1/2 comma root 3 over 2 thing. Now you just got to figure out what's going on. Cosine is referring to the x value, and I know it's in quadrant 3. That's why I know my answer is negative 1/2 from the unit circle. Or you can just memorize it. In the second one, negative 210 means I'm going clockwise, 210 degrees. So if I wanted a visual in my head, that means this. I'm in quadrant 2. That's important. And in quadrant 2, negative 210 would be the same as 210 as far as what kind of angle is it. So 210 is a pi over 6 angle. And in a pi over 6 angle, I have root 3 over 2's and 1/2's. And if I want the tangent, what that means is, first of all, that I know that my x is negative and my y is positive. And tangent's always the y over the x, or the sine over the cosine. So this is like saying 1/2 divided by negative root 3 over 2. And then you just simplify that. We did one of these last week. I don't actually do this anymore, because what I do is I use the hand trick. I know it's a pi over 6. Okay, so as I look at that, I take the sine, which is the 1, the y value, divided by the root 3, and I start here, 1 divided by root 3, knowing, of course, that the x part, or that root 3, was negative. And then when we rationalize that, the root goes on top, comes off the bottom, and my final answer is negative root 3 over 3. So this is how I do my tangents. Because I don't want to go through all that simplification stuff. So I use the hand trick. Basically, memorize the coordinates, and then sine divided by cosine, or y over x for the tangent. What does secant mean?
1 over.
1 over cosine, that's really important to know. 1 over the cosine. Or in other words, 1 over the x value. Or in other words, flip your x value upside down. Flip your x value upside down. Pi over 4. This is pi over 4, right? Both coordinates are root 2 over 2's. Both coordinates are root 2 over 2's. I got to figure out what quadrant I'm in. So 11 pi over 4 is more than going once around the circle. Once around the circle is 2 pi, which is the same as 8 pi over 4. Does that make sense? 8 divided by 4 is 2. So 11 pi over 4 is like 8 pi over 4 plus 3 pi over 4. And the 8 is going once around the circle, so I'm back to where I started. So if I was drawing a picture, just to see what it looks like this. Oh, here is 8 pi over 4, and then go around another 3 pi over 4. What quadrant am I in?
2.
Quadrant 2. In quadrant 2, it's negative and then positive values. And I know that they're both root 2 over 2's. So the coordinates are negative root 2 over 2 and root 2 over 2 for the angle 11 pi over 4. Secant is referring to the x value, but flip it upside down. So I'm going to take that and flip it upside down. 2 over negative radical 2. Can I leave my answer like that?
No.
No. Later on, you're going to simplify that yourself and look at the answer somewhere else. Look how nice they were in this next example. In this next example, they told me, number 1, that I'm going to be drawing a picture. And they told me that I'm going to be drawing a picture in quadrant 2. So I don't even have to do a lot of thinking on that. I know that my triangle is in quadrant 2. Here's my angle. And I know that the sine is 1 over 3, which means my opposite is 1 and my hypotenuse is 3. If I use the Pythagorean theorem, I know that my other side has to be square root of 8. Again, that's not simplified, but I'm just going to leave it like that for the purposes of doing our problem with the conceptual part. Because square root of 8 is like 4 times 2, and the square root of 4 is 2, so it's actually 2 root 2. Now, I need to do one more thing. There's something wrong with this diagram. Sarah,
Wait, if you were just drawing the
no, you got to answer my question, or I'm not answering yours.
What's your question?
What's wrong with my diagram? Why? Because you're in quadrant 2. So your x value is negative. Don't forget that stuff. That's really important. It seems ridiculous, but that's important. If you don't have that, then you're in trouble. Sarah?
Are we allowed to write square root of 8, like if we're just drawing it on?
Yeah, on the drawing, I don't care. Final answer has to be simplified. Final answer. Okay? Now I look at this picture, I'm like, oh, what's my cosine? Oh, look, it's square root of 8 negative over 3. So I write down negative square root of 8 over 3. Whoops, that's not simplified. So I know that I have negative radical 4 radical 2 all over 3. Or in other words, negative 2 radical 2 all over 3. This is my final answer. I'll circle it so the teacher doesn't get confused because he's kind of a bonehead. And that way I get my full credit. Second one, tangent. is the opposite over the hypotenuse. So that's 1 over negative radical 8. Ooh, can't have the radical 8 on the bottom. So I rationalize it by going radical 8 on the top, radical 8 on the bottom. My next step would be that I would have radical 8 on the top, and on the bottom I'd have negative 8. Can I have a radical in my answer if it can be simplified? No. So, my next step now is to go radical 4, radical 2, all over negative 8. And then finally, if I know that that's going to be 2 root 2 all over negative 8, 2 over 8 is the same as a fourth. So I have radical 2 all over negative 4 as my final answer. So it's all about simplifying when you get to the final answer. This one says use your calculator. So grab your calculator this time, and we are going to use your calculator to find these answers. Basically, you're just typing it into your calculator. So I'm going to write down the answers, see if you can get them. Here we go. Again, I'm just writing down the answers. In the first group, you should be in degrees. So make sure you're in degrees, number 1. Number 2, for the cosecant, make sure that you go 1 over the sine. So this is negative 0.5774, and then negative 0.6691, and then, bless you, 1.2208. Try it on your calculator. This is basically just typing it in and seeing if you can get those. So with D, E, and F, it's important to know that you're in radians on your calculator. And secant is 1 over cosine. Those are the 2 important notes to make. And if you're typing these in your calculator, here are the numbers I get. Make sure you can get them. 1.7321, negative 0.7818, and 1.4142. You are always going to go to 4 decimal places when you do trig information. Sine, cosine, tangent, secant, cosecant, and cotangent. 4 decimals. Okay, this is our last page.